Chapter 1. The Morning That Changed Everything. The fluorescent lights of Miller's Gas and Go flickered to life at 5:30 a.m., casting a harsh glow across the frost-kissed concrete of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Sarah Chen, the morning shift supervisor, pulled her worn leather jacket tighter as she unlocked the glass doors, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. At 42, she'd spent 15 years watching the sun rise over the same pump stations, but something about this particular Thursday morning felt different. The bell above the door chimed as Mike Thompson, the newly hired night attendant, stumbled out from his shift. His usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Sarah noticed his hands trembling as he counted out his register. "Everything okay, Mike?" Sarah asked, arranging fresh coffee cups behind the counter. The familiar scent of brewing coffee couldn't mask the unusual tension in the air. Yeah, everything's fine," Mike mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Just tired. Long night." He fumbled with the bills, dropping several on the floor. Sarah had managed gas stations long enough to know when someone was lying. She'd hired Mike 3 months ago, a local kid, fresh out of community college, trying to save money for university. Usually meticulous and cheerful, today he looked like he'd seen a ghost. The door chimed again as Ray Martinez arrived for his morning shift. At 58, Ray had been working at Miller's longer than anyone, his salt and pepper hair and weathered face as much a fixture as the price sign out front. He immediately sensed the tension. "Morning, Sarah," Ray called out, then paused, studying Mike. "Jesus, kid, you look like hell froze over." Mike's hands shook more violently as he tried to close the register drawer. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, his voice cracking. Sarah and Ray exchanged worried glances. The first customers of the day began trickling in, truckers fueling up for long hauls, locals grabbing coffee before work, high school students stopping for energy drinks before class. Sarah tried to maintain her usual friendly demeanor, but her eyes kept drifting to the security cameras behind the counter. At 6:45 a.m., Jenny Walsh burst through the door, her waitress uniform from the diner across the street already spotted with coffee stains. "Sarah, Ray, you need to see this." She was practically hyperventilating, her phone clutched in her trembling hand. The local news website was already loading. Breaking, overnight robbery at Millbrook First National Bank. Suspects still at large. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read further. The details were sparse, but one line stood out. Witnesses report seeing a vehicle matching the description of a white sedan leaving the scene at approximately 2:30 a.m., heading east on Route 27, directly past Miller's Gas and Go. The coffee pot crashed to the floor as Mike bolted for the bathroom, leaving behind his half-counted register and a trail of scattered bills. Sarah's mind raced back to the security footage she hadn't checked yet, to Mike's unusual behavior, to the white sedan she'd glimpsed in the lot when she arrived. Ray moved closer to Sarah, speaking in a low voice. "Should we call the police?" Before Sarah could answer, the bathroom door flew open. Mike emerged, his face ashen, his uniform soaked with sweat. "I need to tell you something," he choked out. "But you have to promise to help me. Please." "I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know anyone would get hurt." The morning sun finally crested the horizon, streaming through the windows and illuminating the fear in Mike's eyes. In 15 years of managing Miller's Gas and Go, Sarah had dealt with shoplifters, drunk customers, and even the occasional fist fight. But as she looked at her young employee's terrified face, she knew the situation would test not just her management skills, but her moral compass as well. The bell above the door chimed again, and everyone froze as 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot. Chapter 2. Secrets Behind the Counter. 2 police officers entered Miller's Gas and Go, their boots squeaking against the freshly mopped linoleum. Sarah noticed Officer Diana Martinez, Ray's daughter, leading the way, her usually warm brown eyes sharp with professional focus. Behind her, Officer James Cooper scanned the store methodically, his hand resting near his holster. "Morning, Sarah," Diana said, her tone carefully neutral. "Dad." She nodded at Ray, maintaining professional distance despite the family connection. "We need to review your overnight security footage." Mike had pressed himself against the back wall, trying to become invisible behind the coffee station. Sarah could see his chest rising and falling rapidly, panic written across his face. She remembered hiring him, remembered his earnest interview where he talked about helping his single mother with bills while saving for college. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, she couldn't believe he was truly dangerous. "Of course," Sarah replied, moving toward the office. Ray, can you watch the register? Jenny, thanks for the news, but you should probably head back to the diner. Jenny lingered, clearly hoping to witness more drama, but finally left when Ray gently shooed her away. The morning rush customers, sensing tension, quickly paid for their items and departed, leaving the store eerily quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators. In the cramped back office, Sarah pulled up the security footage while Diana and Cooper stood behind her. The black and white video showed the usual quiet night shift until 2:27 a.m. A white sedan pulled up to pump 4, but instead of getting gas, 3 masked figures rushed inside. Mike raised his hands, but there was no weapon pointed at him. He typed something into the register, then walked calmly to the safe in the back office. "Stop the tape," Cooper ordered, leaning closer. "Thompson let them in. No force, no threat. He's an accomplice." Sarah's heart sank. But something wasn't adding up. "Wait," she said, rewinding slightly. "Look at his hands. That's not the safe code he's typing. It's..." She paused the frame, zooming in. "That's my phone number." Diana's eyes widened. He was leaving a trail. "Mike," she called out. "We need to talk to you." But when they emerged from the office, Mike was gone. Ray stood alone at the counter, his face grave. "He ran out the back door about 2 minutes ago." "But Sarah, that's not all." He held up a crumpled piece of paper he'd found by the coffee station. "You need to see this." The note was hastily written. "They have my mom. I didn't have a choice. The money's not at the bank. It's hidden at Miller's. Help me, please." Sarah sank into a nearby chair, her mind racing. In 15 years, Miller's Gas & Go had never been more than a quiet way station for travelers and locals. Now it was at the center of a bank robbery, a kidnapping, and a web of lies. But as she looked at Mike's desperate handwriting, she realized this was about more than just missing money or broken laws. "Diana," Sarah said slowly, "before you call this in, I need 5 minutes. I think I know where he's going, and I think I know why he really wanted me to see that security footage." Officer Cooper stepped forward, shaking his head. "This isn't a negotiation, Ms. Chen. This is now an active criminal investigation." But Diana was looking at her father, who gave her the slightest nod. Ray had worked with Sarah long enough to trust her instincts. Diana checked her watch, then said quietly, 5 minutes. "That's all I can give you. After that, this goes by the book." Sarah grabbed her keys and rushed toward her car, her mind piecing together the clues Mike had left behind. The real question wasn't where the money was hidden, it was why a straight-A student with no criminal record would risk everything to help rob a bank. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she caught a glimpse of Ray in her rear-view mirror, giving her a knowing look. Whatever was really going on, she had 5 minutes to prevent a tragedy that could tear their small town apart. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across Route 27 as Sarah drove toward the one place in Millbrook where a desperate son might go to save his mother, even if it meant destroying his own future in the process. Chapter 3: Echoes of Truth. Sarah's Honda Civic wound through the back streets of Millbrook, past the shuttered textile mill where Mike's mother Susan had worked before the layoffs last year. The place where everything had started to go wrong for their family. Sarah remembered Mike mentioning that they'd moved to his grandmother's old house after losing their apartment, a tiny blue cottage near Harper's Creek. The morning fog still clung to the ground as Sarah turned onto Willow Lane. There, parked crookedly in front of the blue cottage, was the white sedan from the security footage. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she pulled up behind it, noticing the back door slightly ajar. "Oh, Mike," she whispered, "what have you gotten yourself into?" The screen door creaked as Sarah approached. Inside, she could hear muffled voices, angry, desperate voices. She pulled out her phone, knowing she should call Diana. 4 minutes left. But something made her hesitate. Through the window, she could see 3 figures, Mike pacing frantically, his mother Susan, tied to a kitchen chair but apparently unharmed, and a man Sarah recognized with a jolt, Frank Dawson, the bank's former manager who'd been fired 6 months ago for irregularities in lending practices. "The money's not at the gas station," Frank was saying, his voice tight with panic. "Stop lying, kid. You said you could get us into the bank system through the ATM network. That's why we needed you." "I tried." Mike's voice cracked. "But they'd changed the protocols. I couldn't override them remotely. I had to improvise." Sarah's mind raced. The ATM at Miller's, It had been out of order for the past week. Mike had been working on it during his night shifts, claiming he was following the bank's maintenance instructions. But he hadn't been trying to fix it, he'd been trying to hack it. "They'll be here soon," Frank growled, pulling something from his jacket, a gun. "Last chance, Mike. Where's the money?" Sarah had seen enough. She dialed Diana's number, speaking in an urgent whisper. "Hopper's Creek Cottage. Dawson's here. He's armed. Mike and Susan are in danger. Hurry." Then she did something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She knocked on the front door. "Mike? It's Sarah. I know you're in there, and I know what's really going on." Silence fell inside the house. Then Mike's shaky voice. "Sarah, please go away. You don't understand." "Actually, I do," Sarah continued, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "This isn't about the bank robbery at all, is it? It's about the evidence you found while working on our ATM. About what Mr. Dawson did with all those foreclosed properties." More silence. Then Frank's voice, darker now. "Get in here." Slowly. Sarah entered, hands raised. The kitchen was small, wallpapered in faded flowers. Susan's eyes were wide with fear, but Sarah noticed something else. The ropes around her wrists were loose. Mike had been buying time, not just for himself, but to free his mother. "You're smarter than you look, Ms. Chen," Frank said, the gun wavering between her and Mike. "Too smart, maybe." "Yes, the kid found my little side business. Thought he could blackmail me with it. But he's not as clever as he thinks." "No," Sarah agreed, taking a careful step forward. "He's cleverer. Show him, Mike." Mike's hand moved to his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I didn't just find the evidence, Mr. Dawson. I live-streamed our entire conversation from the moment you brought my mom here. To the bank's security team. To the FBI. Check your phone. It should be blowing up right about now." As if on cue, Frank's phone began buzzing. His face went pale as he looked at the screen. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. "You see," Sarah said, her voice stronger now, "Mike didn't hide the money at Miller's. He hid the truth there. In our ATM's maintenance logs. Every transaction you've ever manipulated, every property you've stolen through fraudulent foreclosures. He just needed someone to notice he was leaving a trail. Someone who'd care enough to follow it." Frank's grip on the gun tightened. "You're bluffing." "Actually," came a new voice from the back door. "They're not." Diana Martinez stood there, weapon drawn, Officer Cooper behind her. "Gun down, Frank. It's over." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Frank swung the gun toward Diana. Susan, her hands finally free, knocked over her chair, creating a distraction. Mike lunged for Frank's arm. Sarah moved without thinking, her body on autopilot from years of breaking up fights at the gas station. There was a struggle, a shot, but the bullet hit only the faded wallpaper, leaving a hole right through one of the flowers. Seconds later, Frank was in handcuffs, and Sarah found herself sitting at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she accepted a cup of tea from Susan. Outside, red and blue lights painted the morning fog as more police arrived. "I'm sorry," Mike kept saying, to everyone and no one in particular. "I'm so sorry. I thought I could handle it myself." "I thought?" "You thought you could protect everyone," Sarah finished for him. "Just like you've been trying to protect your mom since the mill closed. But Mike, you don't have to do everything alone." Diana was taking notes, her face softening as she looked at her former classmate. "The FBI's been building a case against Dawson for months. Your evidence, plus the live-stream confession, it's exactly what they needed." Ray arrived then, somehow having convinced the police to let him through. He took in the scene, the knocked-over chair, the bullet hole, his daughter holstering her weapon, and simply said, "Well, looks like we're gonna need someone to cover Mike's shift tonight. I volunteer." The tension broke. Susan laughed through her tears, Mike managed a weak smile, and even Diana cracked a grin. Sarah looked around at her gas station family, because that's what they were really, and felt something settle in her chest. The morning's terror was fading, replaced by a different kind of warmth. But as she watched more FBI agents arrive, Sarah knew this wasn't over. The story of what really happened at Miller's Gas and Go was about to become a lot more complicated. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered what other secrets their little gas station might be hiding. Chapter 4, Ripples in Still Waters. The afternoon sun beat down on Miller's Gas and Go as Sarah flipped the back in 30 minutes sign on the door. The morning's events had brought a parade of FBI agents, reporters, and curious locals through the station, all wanting to know how a simple gas station had become the center of a major financial crimes investigation. Now, sitting in her office with Mike, Ray, and Diana, Sarah watched the security footage for the 100th time. But this time, they weren't looking at last night's events. They were scanning months of overnight shifts, searching for other potential victims of Frank Dawson's schemes. There, Mike pointed at the screen. Mrs. Rodriguez from the flower shop. Remember when she came in crying 3 months ago? She just lost her shop to the bank, but the foreclosure numbers never added up. Diana scribbled another note in her already full notebook. That makes 17 suspicious foreclosures we've identified. Dawson wasn't working alone. He couldn't have been. Someone higher up had to be involved. And that's what worries me, Ray said, his weathered face creased with concern. Frank Dawson isn't the type to take a fall alone. He'll start naming names, and some of those names might belong to powerful people in Millbrook. Sarah was about to respond when her phone buzzed, a text from Susan Thompson, Channel 7 news van outside our house. They're saying Mike helped plan the whole thing. Please help. We need to get ahead of this, Sarah declared, standing up. Mike, you've been recording everything, right? All the evidence, all the connections. Mike nodded, pulling out his laptop. Everything's encrypted, stored on secure servers. But Sarah, there's something else. Something I found last night before they grabbed my mom. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The foreclosures weren't the end game. Look at this. The screen filled with property records, bank transfers, and building permits. Sarah's eyes widened as she connected the dots. They're buying up all the land around the old mill. But why? Because of this. Mike pulled up one final document, a preliminary environmental impact study dated 3 months ago. They found natural gas deposits under the mill site. Enough to make everyone involved very, very rich. The foreclosures were just phase 1, forcing people out so they could buy the land cheap. A sharp knock on the office door made everyone jump. Through the glass, they could see Jenny from the diner, looking uncharacteristically serious. Sarah opened the door. You all need to see this, Jenny said, holding up her phone. On the screen was a breaking news alert. Millbrook bank executive found dead in apparent suicide. Ray cursed under his breath. Marcus Wheeler. He was Dawson's boss. Suicide. Diana's police instincts were clearly triggered. Less than 12 hours after Dawson's arrest? Sarah felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. Mike, back up everything. Right now. Ray, call your contacts at the county records office. We need copies of everything, physical copies. Diana. Already on it, Diana said, heading for the door. I'm calling in some favors at the state police. This just went way beyond Millbrook. As her friends scattered to their tasks, Sarah walked out to the main store. The regular afternoon customers were starting to trickle in. Truckers, teenagers, local workers. Normal life continuing while everything changed. Through the windows, she could see more news vans pulling into the parking lot. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number this time. The text was simple. Back off now, or Miller's Gas and Go won't be the only thing that burns. Sarah's hand tightened around her phone. In 15 years of managing this store, she dealt with every kind of trouble imaginable. But as she looked around at her little kingdom of fluorescent lights and fuel pumps, she realized that the real fight was just beginning. The bell above the door chimed as Ray returned, carrying a stack of papers and wearing a grim expression. Sarah, you need to see these. The property records, they go back 20 years. And look who signed off on the original land surveys. Sarah took the papers, her eyes falling on a familiar name. Her heart stopped for a moment as she realized that this conspiracy hadn't just reached into the present-day power structure of Millbrook. It had its roots in the town's very foundations. And her own family's name was right there in the middle of it all. Chapter 5, Family Ties. Sarah sat alone in her apartment above Miller's Gas and Go, surrounded by old photographs and yellowed documents she'd pulled from her father's storage unit. The name on the land surveys, Chen Development Corporation, her grandfather's company, kept drawing her eyes like a magnet. The desk fan hummed in the background as she pieced together a story she'd never known. 20 years ago, her grandfather had conducted the original geological surveys of Millbrook. He He discovered the natural gas deposits but kept them secret, documenting everything in a private journal she now held in trembling hands. The journal's final entry read, "I cannot be part of this. They want to destroy an entire community for profit. I'm going to bury the evidence and walk away. If you're reading this, Sarah, I'm sorry for the burden I'm placing on you." A knock at her door startled her. Through the peephole, she saw Ray, holding a paper bag from the diner. "Brought you dinner," he said when she let him in. "Jenny said you hadn't eaten all day." He paused, taking in the papers scattered everywhere. "Found something." "My grandfather knew, Ray. He knew about everything." Sarah sank into her worn armchair. "He tried to stop it 20 years ago, and now? And now history's repeating itself," Ray finished, setting down the bag. "But Sarah, there's more. I talked to my cousin at the county clerk's office. Marcus Wheeler's death? Security cameras at his office were disabled an hour before he died. And his files? All gone." Sarah's phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. "Last warning. Ask your grandfather what happened to his partners." "Oh wait, you can't. They all had unfortunate accidents too." Ray read the message over her shoulder, his face darkening. "We need to call Diana." "No," Sarah said, standing up suddenly. "First, we need to talk to someone else." She grabbed her keys. "The night manager at the quick stop across town. He worked with my grandfather. He's been trying to tell me something for weeks, but I've been too busy to listen." They headed down the back stairs to the parking lot. The summer night was thick with humidity, crickets chirping in the darkness. As they approached Sarah's car, Ray grabbed her arm. "Someone's been here," he whispered. The driver's side door was slightly ajar. On the seat lay a single photograph, Sarah's grandfather with his business partners, taken 20 years ago. 3 of the faces were crossed out in red ink. A 4th circle targeted her grandfather's face. Suddenly, headlights blazed to life at the end of the lot. A black SUV with tinted windows revved its engine. "Run." Ray shoved Sarah toward the store's back entrance. They barely made it inside as the SUV accelerated toward them, swerving away at the last second and disappearing into the night. Sarah's hands shook as she locked the door. "They're not just trying to scare us anymore." "No," Ray agreed grimly. "They're trying to silence us. Just like they silenced Wheeler. Just like they tried to silence your grandfather." The store's security cameras blinked steadily in the darkness. Sarah walked to the front windows, looking out at the quiet gas pumps. Miller's Gas and Go had been her life for 15 years. She thought she knew every inch of it, every secret. But now she realized the store itself might hold the biggest secret of all. "Ray," she said slowly, "remember when they renovated the storage room 5 years ago? They brought in special contractors, worked at night. My grandfather was still alive then. He insisted on supervising everything personally." Ray's eyes widened. "You think?" "I think he left something here. Something they're still looking for." Sarah turned to the security monitors. "And I think Mike might have found it without realizing what it was." She pulled up the footage from the night of the robbery. There, just before Frank Dawson arrived, Mike had been in the storage room, tracing something on the wall. "Call Mike," Sarah said, already heading for the storage room. "Tell him to bring his laptop and everything he found about the ATM network." "And Ray? Call Diana too. It's time to end this." But as she reached for the storage room door, the lights in the store suddenly went out. All of them. Even the security cameras. In the darkness, Sarah heard Ray curse. Then from outside, came the sound of multiple vehicles pulling into the lot. The night was far from over. Chapter 6, Underground Truths. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow through Miller's Gas and Go as Sarah and Ray crouched behind the counter. Outside, car doors slammed. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Sarah's phone vibrated, a text from Mike. 5 minutes away with Diana. "Hang on." "Sarah," Ray whispered, "your grandfather's renovation plans. The contractor who did the work." "Carl Whitman," Sarah finished. "He died in a hunting accident 2 months later." She pulled out her grandfather's journal, flipping to the last pages. "Look at this blueprint. There's something under the storage room." A flashlight beam swept across the windows. Male voices murmured outside. Someone tested the front door. "Call boxes and breakers are in the back," a gruff voice said. Johnson, Miller, check the storage room. The rest of you spread out. Find Chen and Martinez. Sarah's mind raced. The storage room. That's where they were heading. Where her grandfather had hidden. Whatever it was he'd hidden. Ray, she whispered, remember that fire drill protocol we never use? Ray's eyes lit up. The foam system. Sarah nodded. The gas station's fire suppression system could fill the entire building with fire retardant foam in seconds. They'd never activated it because the cleanup was a nightmare. But right now, it might be their only advantage. Heavy boots approached their hiding spot. Sarah tensed, her hand on the foam system controls hidden under the counter. Ray pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. The first intruder rounded the counter, a tall man in tactical gear, no identifying marks. His flashlight beam hit Sarah's face. She slammed the foam activation button. Alarms blared. White foam began pouring from ceiling nozzles. Shouts of confusion erupted as the intruders were caught in the deluge. Sarah and Ray used the chaos to sprint toward the storage room. They reached it just as two more men were trying to break down its door. In the red emergency lighting, Sarah saw something she'd never noticed before, a slight seam in the floor, running along an unusual pattern. Suddenly, the exterior lights blazed back on. Through foam-streaked windows, Sarah saw police cruisers arriving, lights flashing. Diana's voice boomed through a megaphone. This is the police. The building is surrounded. The intruders began retreating, but their leader, the gruff-voiced man, turned towards Sarah and Ray. In the restored light, Sarah recognized him, James Wheeler, Marcus Wheeler's brother and the bank's current CEO. It's over, James, Sarah said, her grandfather's journal clutched to her chest. We have everything, the surveys, the fraud records, proof of what you did to Marcus. You have nothing, Wheeler snarled, raising a gun. Your grandfather thought he could stop us too. Look where that got him. Actually, came Mike's voice from behind Wheeler, we have everything. He stood in the back doorway, his laptop open. Including the live stream of everything you just said, broadcasting to the FBI and about 3,000 Millbrook residents on Facebook Live. Wheeler spun around. The moment's distraction was all Diana needed. She burst through the front door with her team, taking Wheeler down as Ray kicked the gun from his hand. But Sarah was no longer watching the arrest. She was staring at the storage room floor, where the foam had revealed something, a faint pattern of numbers, visible only when wet. The same numbers that appeared in her grandfather's final journal entry. Mike, she called, bring your laptop. And Diana, we're going to need some help moving these shelves. An hour later, they all stood around an open trapdoor in the storage room floor. Below, a narrow staircase led to a small concrete room. Inside, they found boxes of documents, hard drives, and a single envelope addressed to Sarah. She opened it with trembling hands, reading aloud, Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, you found what I couldn't bring myself to destroy. The evidence of how they planned to poison our town for profit. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you fight them. But I knew someday, someone would be brave enough to finish what I started. I hoped it would be you. Diana was already calling the FBI. Mike was backing up the hard drives. Ray stood guard at the door. And Sarah. Sarah finally understood why her grandfather had insisted she take this job at Miller's Gas and go all those years ago. He hadn't just left her a gas station. He'd left her a mission. But as she watched FBI agents begin cataloging the evidence, Sarah noticed something else in the underground room, a map of Millbrook with areas marked in red. Areas that didn't match any of the known drilling sites. Whatever they'd just uncovered, it was only the beginning. Chapter 7, Burning Truth. The pre-dawn air at Miller's Gas and Go crackled with tension. FBI agents swarmed the property, setting up mobile command centers in the parking lot. Sarah sat in her office, studying her grandfather's map while Diana and Mike worked to decrypt the hard drives they'd found. These red zones, Sarah said, tracing the marks with her finger. They're not drilling sites. They're sinkholes, places where the ground's already starting to collapse from illegal test wells. And look at this, Mike pointed to his screen. Wheeler's company didn't just forge bank documents. They faked environmental impact studies. The gas deposits are unstable. Extracting them could collapse half the town. Ray burst into the office, his face ashen. Turn on the news. Now. On Sarah's small TV, James Wheeler's face filled the screen, a pre-recorded video being broadcast from jail. If you're seeing this, Then Chen and her friends think they've won. But Millbrook citizens should ask themselves, who really has their interests at heart? The people offering jobs and prosperity, or a gas station manager trying to protect her grandfather's legacy? By the way, Sarah, you might want to check on your storage tanks. The floor trembled slightly. Sarah's eyes widened. The underground tanks. They're not just going to destroy the evidence, Mike realized, his fingers flying across the keyboard. They're going to destroy the whole station. Make it look like an accident. Diana was already calling it in. This is Officer Martinez. We need fire and hazmat at Miller's Gas and go immediately. Possible tank breach. Another tremor, stronger this time. Warning lights flashed on the store's safety panel. They must have planted charges, Ray said. Probably during the power outage last night. If those tanks go up, the whole block goes with them, Sarah finished. She pulled up the station's maintenance systems on her computer. The tanks have emergency shut-off valves, but they're manual. Someone has to go down there. The access hatch is in the back lot, Ray said. But with the ground this unstable. Sarah was already moving. Mike, get everyone out of the building. Ray, help Diana evacuate the surrounding buildings. I'm going down there. Sarah, no. Ray grabbed her arm. Let the fire department handle it. They'll never get here in time. She pulled free. My grandfather died protecting this town. I won't let Wheeler destroy it. Outside, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. Sarah raced to the access hatch, her grandfather's journal tucked in her jacket. The ground shook again as she pulled the heavy metal door open. Below, steep stairs led into darkness. Her flashlight beam revealed the massive storage tanks. Warning lights pulsed red. A digital countdown timer blinked on a device attached to the main tank. 3:42. 3:41. Talk to me, Mike, she said into her phone. What am I looking for? 3 shut-off valves, his voice crackled. You'll need to close them in sequence. But Sarah, the tremors. The whole chamber could collapse. She reached the bottom of the stairs. The air was thick with gasoline fumes. Another shock wave hit, stronger than before. Dirt trickled from the ceiling. The first valve was easy, a simple lever near the stairs. The second required all her strength to turn. But the third. It's behind the main tank, she realized. I'll have to squeeze through. The timer showed 2:15 as she edged sideways between the tank and the earthen wall. Her flashlight beam caught something, not just dirt falling now, but water seeping through cracks in the ceiling. The groundwater table. The illegal wells had compromised it. Just like her grandfather had warned. 1:45 on the timer. The third valve was stuck. Sarah braced her feet and pulled with everything she had. Above, she heard sirens. Fire trucks arriving. Too late. 1:20. The valve finally moved. Sarah turned it slowly, carefully, as more dirt and water showered down. Almost there. A massive tremor hit. Support beams groaned. Sarah looked up to see a crack racing across the ceiling. The valve clicked shut just as the timer hit 0:45. But now she had a bigger problem. The chamber was collapsing. Sarah scrambled back toward the stairs, but fallen debris blocked her path. Water poured in steadily now. The stairs were only 10 feet away, but they might as well have been a mile. Sarah. Ray's voice echoed down the hatch. The fire department's here. They're sending down a line. A rope snaked down through the opening. Sarah grabbed it just as the final support beam gave way. As strong hands pulled her up, the underground chamber collapsed behind her with a thunderous roar. She emerged into morning sunlight to find herself surrounded by firefighters, police, and her gas station family. Mike was hugging his mother. Diana was coordinating with FBI agents. Ray looked like he'd aged 10 years. The valves? He asked. Sarah nodded, still catching her breath. Closed. But the water table. Wheeler's wells. The damage is already starting. Look, Mike pointed toward town. In the distance, they could see several emergency vehicles racing toward the old mill area. Sinkholes were opening up across Millbrook, just as her grandfather had predicted. Sarah pulled out his journal, now water-stained but intact. We have to show them. All of it. Every document, every piece of evidence. Before Wheeler's people can bury the truth again, Ray put a hand on her shoulder. They won't. Not this time. As the sun rose over Millbrook, Sarah looked at her battered gas station, her grandfather's legacy. The underground chamber was gone, but the truth it had protected was finally coming to light. And somewhere, she thought, her grandfather was smiling. Chapter 8: New Beginnings. 3 months later, Sarah stood behind the counter at Miller's Gas & Go, watching the morning sun glint off the store's newly installed solar panels. The grand reopening banner fluttered in the autumn breeze, and the parking lot was already filling with familiar faces. The bell chimed as Mike walked in, wearing a fresh University of Pennsylvania sweatshirt. The scholarship committee had been particularly impressed by his role in uncovering the banking scandal. He was starting classes in January, but for now, he was still pulling shifts at the station, teaching Sarah about his updated security systems. "Morning, boss," he called out, setting a box of fresh donuts on the counter. "Mom's flower shop opens next week." The Small Business Recovery Fund finally came through. Sarah smiled, remembering the town hall meeting where the FBI had announced the settlement. Wheeler and his conspirators had forfeited millions, much of which was now helping rebuild Millbrook. The illegal wells were being properly sealed, and environmental engineers were working to stabilize the groundwater. Ray emerged from the back office, where he'd been training their newest hire. "Channel 7's here again," he said. "They want another interview about the gas station heroes of Millbrook." He made air quotes around the phrase that had become their unwanted nickname. "Tell them we're busy," Sarah replied. "We've got actual customers to serve." The door chimed again. Diana walked in, now wearing a state police detective's badge. The case had earned her a promotion, though she still stopped by every morning for coffee. "Thought you might want to see this," she said, sliding a newspaper across the counter. The headline read, "Wheeler pleads guilty, names co-conspirators in banking scandal." "Good," Sarah said firmly. Justice had been slow but thorough. Wheeler's confession had implicated dozens of corrupt officials across 3 states. More importantly, it had cleared her grandfather's name. The store had changed since that night 3 months ago. The underground chamber was sealed, but they'd installed a small plaque near the storage room, commemorating those who had fought to protect Millbrook. Sarah's grandfather's name was at the top. The morning rush began in earnest. Truckers fueling up for long hauls. Teachers grabbing coffee before school. High school kids stopping for energy drinks. But now there was something different in the way they looked at the simple gas station. They understood what it represented. "Hey Sarah," Mike called from the security desk. "Check this out." He pulled up a live feed from their new cameras, showing a white sedan pulling up to pump 4. "Some things never change, huh?" Sarah laughed. The same pump where it had all started. But this time, the sedan belonged to Mrs. Rodriguez, reopening her flower shop with Susan Thompson's help. Both women waved at the camera, knowing Mike was watching. Ray joined them at the counter, 3 cups of coffee in hand. "You know," he said, passing them around, "your grandfather would be proud. Not just of saving the town, but of what you're building here." Sarah looked around at her gas station family. Mike, heading to college but still part of their team. Ray, finally accepting a promotion to assistant manager. Diana, stopping by despite her fancy new job. And all their regular customers, whose lives intertwined with Miller's Gas & Go in countless small ways. The bell chimed again as Jenny rushed in from the diner, clutching her phone. "You'll never believe what just happened at the bank. They're saying..." Sarah held up a hand, smiling. "Jenny, whatever it is, I'm sure it can wait. Have some coffee first." Because that's what Miller's Gas & Go had always been, not just a place to fuel up, but a place where stories began and ended. Where a community came together. Where ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Sarah picked up her grandfather's journal from its place of honor behind the counter. She'd added her own entries, documenting everything that had happened. Someday, someone else might need to know this story. But for now, there were customers to serve, coffee to pour, and a new day beginning at the little gas station that had saved a town. The morning sun streamed through the windows, and Sarah Chen got back to work.